Cool. Okay. So this is being recorded, just letting you know. And if anybody else pops in, I will accept them and try to keep talking and not be disrupted. So basics of biological female hormones. Many of us so anybody that identifies themselves as a female may not have the biological female hormones that are innately in those of us born that way. So I want to make that known up front that this does not have to do with people that may not have been born with these hormones. So this is for biological females. And then this is what we're going to talk about tonight, the overview, like why in the world do we need to study and learn about our hormones? What are estrogen and progesterone? What do they actually do? What is menopause, postmenopause? And then what do we need to do in order to eat and be appropriately prepared for our nutrition and wellness, no matter what stage we're in. Now, the one thing I want to make known too, that we may not be anywhere near menopause. We may not be post-menopause, but we need to have these things in mind as we get going. Why worry about women's health? Well, most of us are not familiar with our own body. The last thing that I remember was probably sex ed in high school, because even in college, it wasn't really talked about. It was more of just like, let's just move along. We know what reproduction looks like, but while we are made for reproduction, there are other reasons, like we're not reproducing every single 9 weeks. So we still need those hormones, and what are they doing? A lot of women are beginning to not settle for less than feeling great. You know, a lot of women are living longer and need to feel that they can be more involved and active in life rather than sitting on the sidelines of life. So by you being here and viewing this, you can help teach other women in your life, but you can also use that information to support your own hormones, ages, stages, and so forth. This is where it got me the most. When I first started getting into nutrition, I just wanted to take on the world, and I wanted to change everything about my life, and I wanted to like research and see everything. But the thing that I realized is that women are targeted in marketing. Women are, like even from a young kid, when we're in the supermarket line with our moms, checking out, we see what a woman should look like. We see the dieting protocols, the foods that they're, like these crazy lose, 40 pounds in 7 days, or just crazy things like that. And then we look at ourselves and compare ourselves. Well, I'm never going to look like that. Or we have all of these things. So this quote by Girls Gone Strong, in which I do have 2 certifications from, says, care about helping women feel and perform better and build the skills to do that. So teaching women how to feel and perform better. So feel better and perform better, but not just that, but helping them build skills so they can do it on their own and not need me forever. Does that make sense? Because I feel like that is something that also some of these companies will do, and like they want to rope you in and constantly bring out new products, so you're constantly spending money with them. And that's a great marketing scheme, but that's it. It's a scheme. It is not a life longevity sustaining process. So that is my goal, is with my clients, is to teach you to not need me forever. Would maybe come back for consults? Absolutely. That's totally fine. That's just continuing education, but not to fall back and need me every step of the way and redo things. So let's start with the first hormone that most of us know about, is estrogen. Now, I did very specific pictures on these slides, so you can make the correlation of what estrogen looks like in us, okay? So you see this woman, she's probably standing for an Instagram, affiliate pose or something. So she's probably doing that. However, we see a woman who was probably got done running or got done working out or is getting ready to. I want you to think of estrogen as strong woman, because strong happens and gains in muscle strength, gains in emotional changes, and all of these things that we work at underneath start to really come forth because of estrogen. It is our female reproductive hormone, and it develops and maintains our reproductive system in women. But the cool thing is it helps to support cognition. Cognition is thinking and thinking about thinking and all of those things. We women have how many things going on in our minds at the same time? Think estrogen for that. Estrogen helps support bone health. I want you to think about this in just a little bit when we talk down the line a little bit here, but estrogen helps bone health. It helps our cardiovascular system, but it is only really prevalent in days 1 to 14 of a woman's cycle, okay? Or it should really only be prevalent during that time. On the flip side, let's look at the other one, progesterone. Again, I made these pictures or chose these graphics for a reason. You notice this woman is sitting here in grass and a beautiful sun thing. She looks like she's at peace, but she is also pregnant. Progesterone is what helps us to hold a pregnancy. And by that, I mean helps to nourish the placenta that is trying to form every month. But that's what progesterone does. But also look at how at peace and zen and just relaxed she feels. I want you to have that image when you think of progesterone. So we have strong, mighty, fierce woman with estrogen. We have calmed, relaxed. We have a pregnant, possibly pregnant opportunity with progesterone. But the problem is that it is only created so it's created in our bodies. It's not like it's just constantly there. We don't have an organ that produces it for us. So it's only there if you ovulate, okay? Now, you can still get a monthly bleed without ovulation, but here's what happens. So let's just pretend that this is let's just pretend that this is your ovary. Now, remember your ovaries are like, like where your hip bones are, kind of in some and down a little bit. That's where your ovaries are. And you have one on either side connected with fallopian tubes. But let's just say like inside our ovary are follicles, okay? Every month they go through a process of getting mature, blah, blah, blah. Some women produce one every month and they alternate. A lot of times they alternate ovaries in which they come out of. Some women produce an egg from both ovaries. So if you get pregnant, the likeliness of twins is high. Another thing that women can do is have one or more eggs come out at the same time and also produce twins that way or multiples that way. But when that egg bursts forth, we call it a burst because it literally pops out of the ovary and then it's in a sac. The egg just moves along down the fallopian tube, but this little sac that's left over connects to the top of your ovary. That is where progesterone is made. Okay, so it's important to ovulate. If you want these benefits of progesterone. If you want a natural diuretic where you're not gaining water weight at the end of the month. If you want to have good metabolism, ovulation is something you want to strive for. If you want to have increased sleep quality, strive to ovulate. If you have thyroid issues and and most of us have a little bit of thyroid issues, but if you have some, you want to ovulate because it's going to help support that. My favorite thing, I call this the Xanax of all things because I can literally feel the months that I do ovulate and have this calming, soothing, sedating, and like, oh, the world could end today, but I'm okay. Like I can totally live that way, but only if I have that natural hormone to calm me. And it only happens if I ovulate. A lot of women have what's called an anovulatory cycle where we don't ovulate every month. And sometimes that happens, but you can still have a bleed. Without progesterone, so think about as we're heading into our period, the first, or, from the week before our period, sometime in there, many of us get irritable. And it's because your progesterone is starting to leave. When you start your bleed, estrogen comes back. Progesterone is only really present days 15 to 28-ish of your cycle. And I say ish, just depends. Everyone's a little different. So how do these two hormones work together? Well, a lot of times we think of balance, right? Again, look at this picture. These things are kind of balanced, right? But notice that they're a little whopper-jawed a little bit, but it still makes a balance. Kind of the same thing with these two. We never want them to be like this, okay? Because they can't be. And if they are, you're going to have some weird negative side effects. We want them to take turns. First half of the month estrogen, and then second half of the month progesterone, and just kind of back and forth kind of thing, okay? And actually when estrogen and progesterone come together, that's when we typically start to ovulate or try to ovulate because the levels are starting to change, and then that's when we start to get in the mood, and your libido should rise. So we don't want our libido super high every day, but just thinking about that. So when it's imbalanced, when let's just say one's a little higher than the other, we can experience headaches, cystic acne. So hormonal acne is from here, your jawline here, down anywhere else on your body. It could be on your back, it could be on your butt, it could be on your legs, it could be anywhere else, but really right here and down, even on your chest, is a hormonal imbalance. You could have miserable periods, sleep disorders, and irritability. If estrogen is too high, like if estrogen stays too high throughout the whole month, that's when you experience infertility, endometrial cancer, malignancies arising in the uterine lining. If progesterone stays too long or is too dominant, you will experience fat gain, moodiness, endometriosis, uterine bleeding, and possibly cancer. So if that's not glorious enough to talk about, we know that the time before we start menopause is called perimenopause. And then that usually happens about 5 to 10 to 15 years before you actually start menopause, okay? I'm not going to talk about perimenopause right now, but menopause. This is when you should be monitored by an OBGYN and endocrinology. A lot of things are going to come up. If you have no more progesterone because you're not ovulating anymore, if you have less and less and less estrogen being made in your ovaries, you're going to have hot flashes, vaginal dryness, reduced libido, and bladder infections. Now tell me how good that is in relationships with marriage. So when you're talking with me, you're going to, this is why we need to have conversations about libido, because it does reflect relationship issues, which is stress, and it also reflects hormone issues, which can also be stress. In menopause and during hormonal issues, we have irritability. And we probably don't even understand ourselves, or as we're speaking out the irritable words that we have, we're like, holy crap, where'd that just come from? That's happening. So why does this matter right now to those of us that are not near menopause yet? Because osteoporosis. We think of osteoporosis as the grandma that's like hunched over, walking through Kroger, pushing the cart slowly and just like really dainty, can't like get her arms out. Like we have this image. But actually osteoporosis, 5% of your last year of perimenopause, you will lose up to 5% of your bone density. So before you hit 40 is when you should be at a healthy BMI for your body frame, your bioindividuality. You should be doing some kind of strength training that is functional, knowing how to pick things up off the floor properly, knowing how to climb stairs properly, knowing how to sit on the toilet properly and get back up off that toilet properly, knowing how to get on the floor and off the floor, putting flour and sugar over your head into the cabinet, those kinds of things, or reaching things off the top shelf at the grocery store for some of my vertically challenged people. Learning how to do that and do that properly is going to help you keep your bone density. But here's the big clincher, is that you can lose up to 10% of your bone density during menopause. This is why we get, you talk about breaking things, right? Like a lot of people, oh, I fell and broke my hip. Like we joke about it. We joke about it because it's stereotypically true. But why is that? Well, because we lost our balance. When we lose our balance, we fall, especially if like we lose our balance and we can't like overcorrect. Think about how many times you've tripped over your own feet. Think about, I keep thinking like flip and flare jeans are coming back in style. And I'm like, I can't do it because I fall over the pant leg. So think about that. And then think about how terrible that would be if you fell and had brittle bones and couldn't have prevented that fall by overcompensating with your muscle strength. Menopause is 5 to 10 years of a woman's life, but we need to set ourselves up for a good 5 to 10 years, and then we need to set ourselves up for post-menopause. This is the time that we're going to talk about emphasis on preventative health. So women during or after they've experienced menopause, all it's done, like they're back, they feel back to quote unquote normal or whatever new normal is. They're going to deal with weakened muscles and less mobility and easier fractures and easier off balance, which I just talked about. They're going to crave more carbs. And if you in your 30s, 20s, in your teens, watching this, listening to this, if you are already having cravings for carbs, we need to talk, especially in the afternoon or before bedtime. Stress mismanagement comes because remember, the Xanax hormone is gone. So when we were able to regulate by ourselves our stress with our hormone, progesterone, it's gone. And we don't know how to do that anymore. Starting to sleep less. Do you ever, when you were a kid, going over to grandma's house and, you know, you guys are up playing cards. Okay, maybe it was just me. I was up playing poker and rummy and all these other card games and euchre with my grandma. And we'd be up until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I go to bed, get up at like 8 or 9. And she was up at 4 o'clock in the morning drinking her coffee. That's what I'm talking about, that sleeping less, higher stress, higher cancer risks, higher mental fog and fatigue. Remember, estrogen takes care of our brains. Depression and anxiety. Think about too, if all of our female hormones like estrogen and progesterone are taking care of our bodies. And then think about how, you know, what we hear a lot of times when women hit that post-menopause stage, if they've been relatively healthy before, they probably are starting to get scary diagnoses through blood work. Their cholesterol may be higher. Their thyroids may not be working. They may have, unfortunately, some kind of cancer risk or heart disease or diabetes. That's when all this starts to come in. And then their motivation for life kind of declines because they're like, what the heck now? Am I just going to dry up, like sit over here and dry up and die? Is that what's next? So thinking about that and nutritional basics. Many of you watching and many of you that do this, I'm working on this with you. You may not know it, but behind the scenes, I am helping you to make sure that your number one priority is blood sugar regulation. I don't care if you're still menstruating. I don't care if you're perimenopausal or postmenopausal, during menopause. I am paying attention to your blood sugar regulation. For menstruating women, I recommend that 1 week before your period is set to start, eating 1 meal a day of red meat. Green leafy veggies are an added bonus, but sometimes it just doesn't sound good, and that's okay. Perimenopausal women need to prioritize sleep and stress management measures so that they can ease into menopause and then post-menopause, understanding how to handle stress. Balanced diet at perimenopause. So some women, it's as early as 35 years old. It needs to have a little higher protein, a majority of their carbs coming from fibrous sources, and fats need to be greater than 50 grams minimum. Now, if someone is having, you know, excess body fat that needs to come off for health purposes, dropping below 50 grams of fat is okay, but at most maybe 4 months of excessive lower fats. That's about as much as you should do. Post-menopause. Again, balanced diet. Balance is the key here. Balance. Higher protein. Carbohydrates can actually go down depending on the activity level. I have a 63-year-old client that runs circles around me and she needs to have extra carbs because of just how much activity she does. And I'm saying physical fitness. I'm saying activity of just riding bikes and hiking and life. And again, she runs circles around me. That's okay. And then we also prioritize anti-inflammatory and functional movements during this time. Some nutrition recommendations. In all things, we should be looking for long-term and longevity. Remember going back to the idea of the checkout counter with mom. Those things are not long-term, and those things are not for longevity. Those things are drastic measures that people take to fit into I can't even think of it. Does Prada even make dresses? I don't know. One of those fancy dresses that I'll never, Versace. Hey, Versace. I know Lady Gaga uses Versace, I think. Okay, anyway, all that to say, those are for events. They do those for events. Yes, it works, but they have to do it every single event, right? So keto and low carb are not a long-term solution for women's health. Veganism causes B12 and other deficiencies in the long run. If you have listened to my podcast on the evolution of the modern diet, you'll know that veganism is actually not healthy. And you'll know that keto and low carb, while they are like, everything works, all the tools work to lose fat, but it is, again, what is going to sustain you forever, the long term and longevity. So here's something that's kind of a thing I hate to talk about, but it's sugar. High fructose corn syrup, added sugars, smoothies, trendy shakes, because I know there's now in Indianapolis, at least, I don't think there are here, but there are now these little pop-up shake places that claim to have protein and all these things in them. Coffee, drinks, etc. These things should be minimized. And if at all, I hate to say restricted, but there is nothing good that comes from high fructose corn syrup. Yes, it's not going to harm you, but what it's going to have you do is to cause you to crave more. For example, to this day, I don't eat at McDonald's. And if I do, I have to have someone with me, and I have to go in there, and they have to be the person that knows. Like, I usually take my husband if that happens. I haven't been there in over a year. But if my husband is with me, he knows that he has to order for me. Why? Because I can order a double quarter pounder with cheese, a large fry, and a large diet soda, because, you know, diet matters at this point. And I will still think I'm hungry afterwards. Subway is the same way. I love Subway. There is just that little flavor in the back of your throat. And I can eat a foot long and still think I'm hungry. And when I look at that mass of that food, like the actual physical mass of a foot long sub, there is no more room left in my stomach, but yet I'm hungry. So I'm having a really candid conversation here and sharing some personal things. Science-wise, high fructose corn syrup does nothing to harm your physical body, but the after effects and the things that it causes our very smart brains to do is to think that we have not been fed. Okay, so just watching that kind of thing. Does sugar make you fat? No. Eating too many calories makes you fat. Does sugar give you diabetes? Actually, no. Sugar does not give you diabetes. Eating too much of calories and having too much added body fat on your body causes diabetes. Something I do recommend, though, is to have a starch for dinner. A starch can be a potato, a rice, a legume, pasta. Having starch for dinner, it increases your blood sugar, which, let's not get too worried about it. But when you have it for dinner, it lowers your stress, cortisol, and that way everything just kind of balances itself out, and you should be able to sleep a little bit better. Some common mistakes, though, when I say, let's reduce our sugar, and so instead of eating the starch for dinner, people will eat healthy sugar, like in a paleo or other, like, diet protocol. Let's use some other kind of dessert with different recommendations. Well, that's okay in relatively small amounts. And by small amounts, I mean no more than like one serving a day to begin with if you're eating a ton of sugar all day long. Just slowly backing off, but don't replace your starch calories for something sugary on the regular. Prioritize. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what stage of life you're in. Always get to your routine doctor's appointments. Women need to make sure that they have a pap smear. A pap smear is usually done if you have not had what do they call that? What is that? It's not negative. It's a abnormal. If you have an abnormal pap smear, they usually do them more frequently, but they do pelvic exams every year. And a pelvic exam is a physical exam where the doctor will typically check things out with visually, and then he or she will insert their hand and like feel around and make sure that there's no growth or masses in your female organs. Yeah, they're going to push on your stomach and that kind of stuff too, so they can feel all the way around the organs. But that is the one way, without having to do a pap smear or anything else, that they can actually see with their eyes and feel with their hands that there's a normal organ there. Breast exams. So also every year your doctor should be doing a breast exam on you. And if you are not familiar on how to do a breast exam, it is October. It is breast cancer awareness. It is a lot of cancer awareness. I encourage you to look up on the breast cancer awareness website on how to do your own breast exam and just kind of know your anatomy. Some of us are lumpy. Some of us are saggy. Some of us are empty, and we can feel the fibrous tissues in there. And that's if that's normal for you, then that's normal. But when you notice that there's a change, and I realize I'm feeling my boobs in this thing, I'm sorry. But if you feel something abnormal for you, that's when you call your doctor and make an appointment and say, hey, can you just kind of check this out? And they will do an ultrasound and a mammogram. Mammograms are actually not painful. I don't know why people complain about them. I've had them done. It wasn't a big deal. I think my kids stepping on my boobs hurts more than that. So unless, I guess I shouldn't even talk about that right now because it's being recorded. Anyway, blood work for your lipid panels, which means your cholesterol, your glucose, that kind of thing, your thyroid, and more needs to be done. You need to prioritize sleep and stress management. Getting grounded in nature for 10 minutes a day, every day as best you can, even playing in snow. Go for, like being carefree with your spouse or with your grandkids, with your own kids, with your nieces and nephews, whomever it is, go play, or just throw a snowball at your husband in the face. Either way, that's going to help you be grounded. Caloric deficit will help you prevent any hormonal belly fat issues coming on. Functional movements, no more marathon running. Running is actually not the best thing for us. Functional movements are. Drink plenty of water. Putting a little pinch of some pink Himalayan salt or some, Celtic sea salt inside your water will help you absorb some more nutrients and minerals. Eat properly distributed macronutrients. Limit your dinner alcohol, your after dinner alcohol, sugared afternoon drinks, sugars period. Lower your caffeine. And when you need to pick me up, go for a walk or exercise. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can contact me at any of these places. Thank you so much for your time.